before we started, we kind of decided that anything that starts with a T is okay on TRT, right?
Yeah.
So Trenbolone and Turinabol and Telmisartan.
That means trust alone. We can add that
alone, yeah. What else do we have?
T-Deca, T-Mast,
yeah.
T-Primo.
But we get that question all the time. We have guys who are like, hey, I'm on TRT, like real legit TRT. What can I add to that? You know, and then usually that's the whole question. What can I add to that period? And it doesn't really, you can tell that there's a lack of education in there because there's a lot of questions. Like not only what can you add, but for how long? What are your goals? What are the things that you should look out for? And so it's kind of like a big question in a way. But we get that a lot, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity. We've got Steve on to talk a little bit about this. I mean, I think in general, let's take like your average guy. And what is our main goal? We all want to grow muscle. So let's say a guy's on TRT, normal range, and next step is he wants to do something. Take it away, guys. Where do we go from here?
I think one thing is we have to be a little bit, there is a distinct difference between TRT protocols, UK and US.
What do you mean?
US is much more tolerant of you running above range.
Oh, yeah.
UK is not. And so very often you can see TRT, particularly the National Health Service TRT, getting a lot of bother if they test out of range. Whereas in the States, they seem to be a little bit more forgiving of elevated levels.
That's very true. That's very true. So you see, when you look at the prescription differences, in the UK, they keep most guys around 23 to 27 nanomoles per liter. I believe that's the range. And then in the States, they don't really go by the numbers. They go by milligram dosages. So I know guys that run 200, 250, 300 milligrams per week. And that's on a legitimate prescription. Yeah. Plus those 50 milligram Anavar tablets alongside of that, which is awesome, obviously, but that's basically a cycle.
Yeah. Yes. So you've got a private route over here. Now, if you go the NHS route, you're highly unlikely to get nth or SIP. You're only going to get SUST or Nebido or gel. And Nebido will start at one shot every 12 weeks, and SUST will start at one shot every 3 weeks. And they will hold you to that for a while before they consider reducing, i.e. the frequency. With SUST, they will not go below one every 2. And with Nebido, you'll be hard pushed to get one every 10. Private will do nth and SIP. They will do multi-shot. They'll do everything else. But they bring their test in from Europe because test SIP, test nth prescription in the UK is insanely expensive.
No kidding.
So a vial, a mil of SUST will be, prescription retail will be about £4.50 a vial, £3.50 a vial, somewhere around there. A mil of test nth is 89 quid.
89 quid, that's 89 pounds?
Mm-hmm.
Good God.
That's insane.
I got these. I get these from my doctor. These are like, I can't remember what the retail price is, but I want to say I think I can get, I think they're around like $10 or something is what I can pay with my insurance, maybe.
That's for UK test. So if you get European test, it's much cheaper. But UK manufactured test, 1 mil of test nth is about 89 quid a vial.
How much is the Nebido there for one vial of 4 milliliter?
About 90 quid.
Yeah,
£90.
Yeah, it's same here. So the Nebido here is very expensive, but the Bayer Inanthate is then super cheap. So it's like $4 or $5. And of course, the pharmacies, if you buy bulk, you get it way cheaper. So here in Thailand, the prescriptions are very modest if you get it through a clinic. I have a prescription through one of the private hospitals here, and then you self-prescribe, to a favorable range, which is a little bit more for bodybuilders and not necessarily medically approved. So I think that's where the TRT plus questions are coming from.
Sure.
So before we started, we kind of decided that anything that starts with a T is okay on TRT, right?
Yeah.
So Trenbolone and Turinabol and Telmisartan.
That means trust alone. We can add that
alone, yeah. What else do we have?
T-Deca, T-Mass, T-Primo.
So you bring up a good point, Dave, that and I've seen people run into this. Sometimes you're like, hey, I'm going to get a prescription. I want to keep it legit. But once you do, even here in the States, especially for that first 6 months to a year, you're going to be locked into doing some lab work. So you might not be able to just run out and start cycling again without getting yourself in some trouble. If you do show up and you use like 2-3 times what you were supposed to, and the doctor sees that, they'll cut you off. Like they don't mess with, at least a lot of doctors will. I'm not going to say like your, private TRT clinics where they're really pushing a lot of gear, but like just a family practitioner that prescribes you, 200 milligrams every 2 weeks or 100 milligrams every 2 weeks, something like that, something, real modest, real old school. If you show up with high levels, they'll stop prescribing. So there is a factor there. And I do think that in a way, that can be part of what makes TRT people, or it should be part of the factors of when TRT people look for compounds to add to their TRT to do a cycle. Part of it is, what can I get away with within a short period of time,
I mean, the thing, I get a bit pissed off with people trying to shoehorn it as TRT. I mean, the key with TRT is it's in the name. It's testosterone replacement therapy. And it's to replace natural ranges. That doesn't mean you can't go higher. You can do what the fuck you want at the end of the day, but don't try and dress it up as something it's not. What I get frustrated with is people say, oh, I'm on TRT, or I'm on sports TRT, or I'm on this TRT. No, you're on a cycle. It might be a low cycle, but you're on a cycle. Don't try and, because the problem is when people start to hide it around TRT, they then start to feel that they have no responsibility to management of it. And even if you're running a 150 mega test a week and 100 mega primo, which is very, very popular as a cruise dose at the moment, you still need to keep an eye on things, because your HDL is going to get hammered to living fuck out of. True. And the other problem there is that obviously you go on cycle. We all know the factors that we need to look out for. Blood thickens, HDL lowers, everything else. And obviously there's a hormone manager itself. But if you're not returning to within natural ranges between cycles, you have a strong possibility that your levels are not going to return down. They're going to stay elevated.
Sure.
So there's more management. So I don't have an issue if you want to run 500 meg a week for the rest of your life. But with that will come a certain level of management and an elevated level of risk. What I get frustrated about is that because people put a label on it as sports TRT or whatever, they seem to think that absolves them of any cycle management within what they're doing, and it does not.
No, you should still do your blood work frequently. Make sure you have ancillaries in place. Whether those are medical ancillaries like a beta blocker or an angiotensin receptor blocker or something to improve your liver function, right? Like a TUDCA, for example. Even a low maintenance dose of 250 milligrams TUDCA is highly beneficial, or something to control your lipids, right? Ezetimibe to prevent the absorption of cholesterol. So there's so many things you can look at, but of course, the higher the dose gets, the more management you need to put in place to keep yourself healthy. So if you go with a like medical TRT, you should be able to get away with maybe 3 shots of 50 milligrams test enanthate or cypionate per week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You probably don't need an aromatase inhibitor unless you're high body fat or a high aromatizer. And you probably also don't need a beta blocker or something to control your blood pressure if you're keeping on top of your electrolytes or everything else that you need to do to stay healthy. But as soon as you start escalating the dose upwards, or you throw things on top, it gets more complicated. And then before you know it, you're on 15 different compounds. That's my TRT plus. And now it's basically a cycle. I mean, I've done low dosages of multitude of different things, and you still turn out to be a freak. But I could say that I was running 150 milligrams a test, plus 125 primo, plus 4 units of growth, plus 10 units of insulin, plus this, plus that. Right? So the testosterone dose is TRT, but everything else turns it into a freaking cycle.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the other thing of like I say, particularly with this test and mass popularity at the moment, I don't think anybody's sort of recognizing that that's putting your estrogen levels quite low.
Yeah. They can, yeah.
You know, and you might be all right 6 months, you might be all right 12 months, but you start sitting, low end of estrogen range for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we're going to start seeing stuff like an early deterioration of eyesight. We're going to have possibly problems with joint integrity, let alone the potential problems through cholesterol as well. But so you've got to. I mean, it all boils down to knowledge, doesn't it? At the end of the day, but there is a very simple thing that everything has its price, and if you're going to mess around with TRT, there is costs attached to that you need to be aware of and keep an eye on. And like you say, the amount of people that say, right, I'm going on TRT, I'm just going to do a mil a week. How long have you done that for? I've done
3
it for
months.
18 months. Okay, have you done a blood test? No. So you finally get a blood test and, hemo's 205 and, red cells at 6.1 and you're like, look, mate, you're in a fucking mess here.
All right, well, listen, guys. I want to steer us back, though. Go ahead, Steve. Okay. Now I got to steer us back because we got to get on topic to what can I take?
Oh, sorry.
You want to know what you can take? Yeah. So since most guys go on TRT as a crutch,
yep.
I always say that TRT is kind of like the new sports car for middle-aged men. They can't afford a sports car. Right? You have a midlife crisis. You're like, I want to drive a sports car. I can't afford it. I'm going to get on TRT. Right? That's the next best thing. Now they feel young, their libido goes up, they feel a little bit more confidence, but they start this in an unhealthy state. Their lipids were already shit. Their blood pressure was already shit. Their body fat levels were already shit. What happens? A little bit of test, 4 weeks they feel good, and then all the side effects start. And I talk with these guys frequently. So what I always hammer on people is get healthy first, get everything under control, and when you're in a good state of health, if you still need tests for actual TRT purposes, take it by all means. Yeah. Take it. Get on TRT.
That's
enjoy
good advice,
yourself, right?
Yeah, that's good advice.
You won't suffer the side effects, and then you start rotating through the compounds that you're interested in, because nobody ever just goes on TRT and leaves it there. You start with tests, and then 3 months later, you're like, I heard about Primo. Yeah. I heard about Anavar. I'm going to ask Scott Mc.Nally to make a 20-minute segment on Think Big with Dave and Steve and see what I can add.
You just read so many people's minds right now that are watching the show. Yeah. I mean, some of them not, but a lot of them,
I mean, it's the other thing, isn't it? It's like, right, I've been on TRT. I'm doing 125 meg a week. I feel good, but I want to feel a bit more.
Yeah,
exactly. And a lot of that's driven by, people with over sensationalist reports about what the effects they've had off TRT. Oh, I felt amazing. I was shagging like a bunny rabbit 24/7. No, you fucking weren't. Fuck off. Not at all. Don't lie. No, it wasn't. Regarding compounds to add, UK based, I'm not too sure about American testing, but UK based Mast and Primo won't show. So if you're using genuine Mast or Primo, that's not going to show in your blood work apart from its effect on estrogen. So Mast and Primo are very easy, obvious choices to throw in with a TRT. The downside is obviously that you can't run a lot because it's going to smash your estrogen through the floor. TRT-wise, they'll start giving you HCG to try and increase the estrogen levels.
And HDL will come up also that way. So what I noticed with most guys is, let's say they run 150 milligrams a test and 250 to 500 IUs ACG 3 times per week. So maybe you do 50 milligrams a test 3 times per week, and in between those shots, you take 250 to 500 IUs ACG. Your estrogen is quite high, but your HDL and SHBG is quite favorable. So your lipids are managed and your neuroprotection is managed through the estradiol. Then you add in maybe 100 to 125 milligrams of Primo, depending on your body fat levels, or Masterone. And this way, the ACG can offset the estradiol reduction and the HDL reduction, but you would still have to stop, ideally 4 weeks before going in for blood work. And, depending on what your healthcare provider wants of you, maybe that's every 3 months, maybe that's every 6 months, maybe once a year. So when you go in there to do your blood work to get your script renewed, come off. Go to your regular TRT dosages for at least a month, and that should balance everything out. And if you really want to improve your lipid levels, okay, maybe 10 milligrams of Nolvadex, to improve that further, because that usually brings your SHBG up quite favorably. And of course, that will reduce your estradiol as well and worsen your liver enzymes. So it might be good to do blood work 1 month before you get your script renewal out of pocket. And then you go in for actual blood work with your healthcare provider and kind of manipulate your way through there. But still, you're trying to kind of circumvent the system, which I'm not against. You just have to be aware of how you need to manipulate and interpret your own blood work if you want to go, a little bit more beyond what your doctor is trying to advise you.
The only problem with that is most people aren't willing to do that amount of effort to manage their own TRT.
No.
Yeah.
The educated ones that pay a vested interest in their health and what they're doing already have some idea of where they are, but it's the I want to add a bit to get massive brigade that I'm just not going to invest in that sort of management. EQ used to be very popular for TRT people years ago because it doesn't really show on the blood test, and because the estrogen effects are a bit skewy with E1 and everything. Yeah. The DECA is a popular one for the older guys with a little bit of joint support, but the problem with DECA is it will generally show as test. So then you have a problem that when you do a bloods and DECA's in the system, you're going to see an elevated level of estrogen when in fact your test level is genuine in what you're doing. It's just that you've added 50 to 100 milligram of DECA a week to give you a little bit of support from that point of view.
Right.
So these are all things you've got to be a little bit careful of. The most simplest way is quite simply, like you say, stop, give it time for it to clear so that when your bloods are done, you are where you need to be. But stuff like cholesterol and blood thickness and those sort of things, you're going to have to manage throughout because they will not correct in 3-4 weeks' time.
No, that's true. That's true.
By just lowering the dose. If you just stop and lower the dose, you are not going to correct shitty HDL. You're not going to correct fat blood. You're going to have to intervene with those in a physical supplementation or bloodlet sort of scenario.
I've seen that before where somebody is doubling up on that, because there's another thing you could do. You could just run more tests if you want to turn that, and you mentioned that before we started, Steve, that what can I add to my TRT to create a cycle? You could just add more tests. But I have seen it happen where somebody, does that or runs anything else and that their hematocrit goes up. Then they bring everything back down. They're back in that normal range for testosterone. Estrogen looks good too, but their doctor sees that flagged hematocrit and they say, oh, wow, you're having a really bad response to this testosterone dose. We need to bring that down. Don't take any testosterone for the next 2 weeks and then let's retest. And then before you know it, you're in a really terrible cycle.
Yeah, you're in that hormone roller coaster.
Yeah, well, you're in a terrible place too with your doctor. That relationship changes. You've raised some red flags with your doctor, and now you're going to have a harder time getting things back to normal again.
So I always wonder what the reasoning is for people to go 100% legit if they want to run more than what 100% legit doctor is willing to prescribe. Like if you're going to do cycling, you're going to have to learn how to manage the side effects all by yourself. Yeah. Or maybe hire a coach who's knowledgeable about that and get some guidance. And then, maybe within a 3-month or 6-month coaching period, you learn how to manipulate your own blood work under the supervision of a knowledgeable guy.
Yeah.
And then you just do it by yourself. I mean, I think the percentage of prescribed TRT guys and self-prescribed, there's a huge difference here.
Here in the U.S., there's a legal element, a lot of people who are thinking like, I don't want to travel. I travel for work, blah, blah, blah. Or I don't want to take this testosterone on vacation with me unless I have a script. Some people, they just don't want to break the law. And I can't blame them,
No, but there is an element of it's a bit like saying, I've got a sports car, I want to drive fast, so I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick the road with the most fucking speed cameras on it.
Yeah. Ethan said, I think it's a little typo here, but it was that his wife would feel better about him using it versus some underground compound, So I get that.
I get that, but you've also got to remember that if you're going script because you want legit gear, you're going script in the quantities of legit gear you can get your hands on.
Absolutely.
So you're still going to be using UGL for the cycle element of what you're fucking doing anyway.
That's why if you want to supplement on top of it, you're going to have, because otherwise you run through your script in a week.